Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Level 1 podcast, The Business of Racing. I'm James with Level 1, sitting here with old Kyle Dagger. Say hey, Kyle.
Hey, how are you?
And Alex, the main man.
Hey, how y'all doing?
And everybody's doing good, I think. But you guys, I got my Diet Mountain Dew I'm drinking. I'm still waiting on the check, though, by the way.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the check yet.
I don't know if that's
In fact, I haven't even seen any free Diet Mountain Dew. I had to pay for this. So what you guys been up to?
Working on race cars.
Working on race cars.
Yeah.
What you been doing? You been trying to find old Johnny Davis some money?
Yeah, trying to, man. Trying to.
Oh, Alex here, he does some marketing stuff with JD Motorsports, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's trying to find some money. Try to get him find us some money, and he didn't find us no money, but he sends a bill. So I don't know what the hell's up with that. I don't know what's up with that deal, but so we're sitting here today. We're going to talk a little bit about Rockingham. You guys are part of the younger generation. I don't know how much you guys actually remember about Rockingham, but it was a big part of NASCAR for a long time.
I remember a lot of old people talking about it.
A lot of old folks talking.
I remember the truck races. That's about it.
Yeah, the truck races are pretty cool, as far as, from a fan standpoint. And I want to talk right now. I mainly want to talk a little bit about my part of when an investment group was trying to bring it back a couple of years ago, and we're going to have Jim Blankenbaker on here in a little bit, and he was part of the part of that investment group. He was in pretty deep with that deal, so he kind of knows a lot of the inside stuff. But basically, for my part of it was, I know Jim obviously, and he contacted me one day and said, "Hey man, this is, I'm part of Vetshelp.org, and this is what we're doing with the track, and why don't you come down here to the track and meet with us? I got some stuff I want to talk to you about." So I went down there and met with them, and at the time, they were just trying to get something going at the track, some kind of action happening there. It was a long way from hosting another race. This was obviously a year or two past the truck races, and so I went down there and talked to them and everything. And basically the way it started with us was they wanted to know if we would be interested in moving our driver development testing to the small half-mile track out back. They called it Little Rock. So we kind of struck a deal on that, and we started using that small track for our driver development testing. And along the way, we had various other talks, and at the time, they were trying to get the Rolling Thunder Modified Series in. I don't know if did you hear those guys?
Mm-mm.
No. Basically, they're stock clip modifieds, not really like tour type NASCAR modifieds.
Yeah.
Kind of like the IMCA style, but on pavement. And and really that wasn't looking too good. They were hitting some roadblocks and stuff. And I told Jim, I said, "Hey, look, man, you guys do what you want to." I said, "But you put those cars out there on a mile track, and you're probably gonna be sweeping somebody up at the end of that race." So they kind of kept going with that, and like I said, they were hitting a lot of roadblocks. So they kind of asked me what my opinion was, and I said, "Well, you can actually, yeah, okay. Let me back up. Actually, they wanted to know if I had any ins with any of the touring late model series that could possibly get there, and UARA had ran there before." And I think maybe that was Hooters Pro Cup ran there. And I said, "Yeah, we can probably get you guys in touch with someone." I said, "But you've got this kind of unique facility, and you're trying to bring it back." I said, if it was me, I would try to have something special, something that's unique just to Rockingham." And they said, "Well, would you be interested in, coming up with a concept?" And I said, "Sure, give me a couple of days to think about it." So after a couple of days, I got back a hold of Jim and I said, hey, how about, we use, a lot of these old NASCAR cars that are sitting around that don't really have any real value after they're out of date. Around here anyway, there's, you can't walk around the corner without tripping over one, seems like. And so Jim's like, well, hey, that's a pretty good idea. What are you thinking for engines? What are you thinking for this? What are you thinking for that? And they're like, well, how about if you just, put together a rule package, a basic rule package? And I said, sure, I can do that. So I did that, and we had another meeting, and we went over the basic rule package as far as engines and transmissions and that sort of thing. And we talked a little bit about insurance, because obviously the faster these cars go, the more insurance is going to cost, yada, yada, yada. We talked tires and that sort of thing. And they liked it. So I kind of gave everything to them and went on about my way. And a couple of days later, they called me up and said, hey, the guy that's running this thing, Craig Northacker, he really likes this concept. Would you be interested in running the deal? And I said, well, sure. I got a lot going on, but sure, not a problem. So we went to PRI that year, and we actually talked to American Racer there and talked to those guys about a tire. And they had a tire that had been in previous production for K&N that they thought would work really well on that style of car, on that big of a track. They were worried a little bit about tire wear and some other things. And I said, well, that's things that we can kind of tweak as we go along. And as it turns out, we ended up having a tire test there, and everything was looking really good. We had a driver's meeting down at our shop. Brought in a bunch of local guys that were really interested in running the series. In fact, there were several cars that were being built for the series. We were going to compete ourselves in it. And then, like I said, we had the tire test, and everything was really shaping up really well. And then about that time, I kind of started noticing some cracks, some chinks in the armor with Vetshelp. One huge problem they had there was water. They, all the wells the pumps were locked up, and you couldn't flush a toilet or turn a sink on or anything there. And there were some issues with electrical, and there was some issues with some of the structures of the building, some of the roofs and that sort of thing. And they basically had two guys out there trying to repair all this stuff. And I'm like, well, no, wait a minute. This is supposed to be a multi-million-dollar company that's trying to bring a large 1 mile former NASCAR race facility back to life. And they got, two guys out there trying to do all this stuff. You would expect to see, crews of guys. So I'm like, well, that's their business, not mine. I'm on the racing side. And so part of the two of the main issues on the race side, the competition side, was the purse and the tires. So I don't think a lot of people realize that somebody has to buy all of those tires prior to the race. So, you needed, you're hoping for, 30 plus cars. Each car was going to need at least 2 sets of tires. That's a lot of money. So somebody's got to stroke a big check to buy the tires initially. Obviously you sell the tires so the money comes back, but somebody has to stroke that check initially. And also the purse. And so, once again, I sit down, put everything together, and Craig Northacker signed off on it. Actually, we signed the contracts for everything on the hood of our race car at that little track. There's a picture of it out there somewhere. So they agreed to fund a purse. I want to say the total purse was $12,500 a race initially, and that was as low as it would be. If they could sell, some sponsorship as far as track signage and that sort of thing. And once the front gate started doing better and all that, we were going to up the purse. So that got signed off on. Okay, everything's great. And then we had the tire test, and everything was great there. The tires actually did everything they hoped they would. And there's in-car video of that tire test on our YouTube channel if people want to go check it out. And like I said, though, about that time was when we kind of started seeing the chinks in the armor and stuff. And the first open practice was set for sometime in early April that year. I can't remember the exact date. But we were going to need these tires. You don't need a purse for a practice, but you need these tires there. So I keep harping for, hey, we got to get these tires ordered. We got to get these tires ordered. We got to get these tires ordered. And they kept pushing back. We'll get it done. Blah blah blah. And so to kind of buy some time, we actually rescheduled the first open house for a week or two later, something like that, to kind of buy them some extra time to get the tires in there and that sort of thing. And not to mention some tire changers, and as far as the machines change tires, and guys to run them, and that sort of thing. We already had everything set up with a fuel distributor. Basically, they would send a tanker truck out full of race fuel, and they would sell the fuel there, and they would pay the series their part of it. So we didn't have to pay for the fuel up front, but we did have to pay for the tires up front. Well, even that next open house kind of came and went, and right about then it was getting to be pretty obvious that things were kind of going downhill. And I had heard that their lease was coming up due, and that the gentleman that actually owned the track was not going to renew the lease. They were going to have to purchase it outright, which they had told me they were going to do. But obviously that didn't happen. The story I got was, they were basically haggling over the price, but I don't know what happened in that deal. You'd have to be on the inside to know that. And once everything kind of became apparent that, hey, this deal's going in the tank, I called everybody who had registered as a driver. We put it out on social media that, hey, things are on hold and until further notice. And sure enough, 2-3 weeks later, we had a driver development test session scheduled for around that time, a couple of weeks after the open house date, the second open house date. And we were able to get in there and do that, but it was like pulling teeth. The gentleman who owned the track had his people there, and the Vetshelp people were there. And I'm like, look, we need to get this day done, and then we'll figure something else out after that. So they were nice enough to let us finish that out, and that was kind of the end of it. And then, the plug got pulled, and that was that. And this isn't really about the X Cup series, but just to kind of put a final pin in that deal, I called a few local track owners and pitched them on the idea of a small touring short track series. And we got 3 tracks that said they would be willing to do it. We'd have to come up with the purse, and obviously the purse would be substantially less and that sort of thing. But there really wasn't a whole lot of interest in doing that. We ended up having an open house at Dillon, and there was an extremely low car count, and I got enough going on without trying to beg a bunch of guys to come racing. So that was kind of that with the X Cup series. That was kind of that as far as me with Rockingham. And then, like I said, we'll have Jim on here in a little bit, and he can kind of give kind of an insider's view. But now, Kyle, you really weren't around for a lot of our Rockingham stuff.
Yeah, that was about the time where I had just kind of started running for you guys. I remember I did get to go to the tire test and hang out with you guys that day.
Yeah.
That was about the extent of my...
Was Mark there that day?
I don't think Mark was there.
Because Mark Davis, I'm talking about, he came out and shook the car down at all of the
The
test
short
days.
track,
The test days that we had there on the short track, and we had what's that cat's name?
Bryant.
Yeah.
Doolin.
Yeah, Bryant Doolin came in out of Texas and actually drove the car. He was a guy that we were working on some stuff with at the time, and he did a good job, and the car did a good job, and the tires did a good job, and everybody kind of guessed right as far as how everything was going to work.
I was surprised with how smooth the whole day went and everything kind of.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
Kind of worked.
Yeah, no kidding. We made one small camber change on the right front just to get our temperatures evened out, and man, those tires look like the plan was we ran 50 laps that day. Actually, a little bit closer to 60 by the time you figure everything in. And initially, the race was going to be, we wanted the races to be 100 laps at some point, but to keep guys from having to buy more than one set of tires, the first couple of races were going to be 50 laps, and then we were going to see how it went. Maybe we could just get by with two right side tires to run another 50 or something like that. But the plan always was that your race tires from the previous race, you would bring those back and practice on them. So you didn't have to pay for a practice set, and then you would buy one new set and you would run that race and then bring those tires back to the next race to practice on, and so on and so on and so on. And they looked like they would have easily been able to handle that. I mean, they still have, if you know anything about race tires, they still have what we call good hole in them, even after close to 60 laps. And the car was going about as fast as we kind of wanted it to fall in that sweet spot with competition versus insurance prices, versus the faster these things go, the more they cost, and that's just the reality of it. We wanted to kind of keep them in that 140 range, and that's about where we ran that day. And we were actually geared a little bit low because we just guessed at it. We were about, I don't know, 200 or 300 RPM low, something like that. So I think we probably could have got up around 140, 1, 2, 3, somewhere around there. And that's the car all by itself. But like I said, it was cool for a minute, and then it kind of wasn't.
Yeah.
So you got anything you want to add to the whole Rockingham saga, Alex?
Nah, man. Other than Rockingham produced some really good racing from what I've seen.
It did. And I've got some opinions as far as the business side of Rockingham. I'm going to hold off on those for now till we get Jim on the line. But if you sit down and really look at everything, I truly think that nobody in their right mind would ever try to run a large scale race there again. The numbers just don't work out. They really don't. And that's just it. So, all right, man. Well, looks like that's a pretty good place there. Let's see if we can get old Jim on the phone. All right, everybody. We want to welcome Jim Blankenbaker to the show here. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Man, we're doing phenomenal. How you doing over there, Kyle?
I'm doing good.
Kyle's over there in the corner. He's kind of quiet. He just ate a very large cheeseburger.
I did.
So he may be asleep in a little bit.
It was a struggle.
It really was. It was real. Okay, so basically, prior to this, we kind of talked about a lot of my experiences with the track at Rockingham. Jim was a lot more internally involved than I was. Why don't you kind of tell everybody how you came to be involved with the track and Vetshelp and your job description and all that good stuff?
Well, again, thank you for giving me a holler, and I appreciate you waking me up this morning. I got called in to join Vetshelp as Vice President of Operations and Development. And primarily it came from a document that I'd written back in 2006, 2007 that had focused on post-traumatic stress injuries for guys that were cycling back. I shouldn't say guys, for soldiers that were cycling back from being in country. And that there needed to be kind of a delineation of the individuals, because some some people needed to go to Wyoming and fly fish for 6 months with the help of therapy to get back to being, I'll say, some semblance of mental health to where you can kind of re-socialize. And then to the other side of it was, and this is the part that we were working on, is that there were many people who were coming back from post-traumatic stress needed, you have to trigger the event in order to understand the problem, in order to get to the root of the problem. And one of the problems is if you can never kind of trigger the event in a safe way, the event gets triggered in a negative way. And so in our world, we were trying to do it in a safe way and in a very healthy way, and that's where using racing as the tool, and it didn't just mean being a driver. It could have been the guy going over the wall carrying tires, the guy going over the wall with the jack, the guy going over the wall with the fuel. It could have just meant being part of a team. And so we were working on, and you got to remember, this is 2006, 2007, 2008. We were working on that from that point of view. So, fast forward, almost a decade, and I'm told that this individual has secured this facility and had gotten a copy of the thing that I've written before and wanted to implement it. And he, ironically, was also supposed to have gotten contractual control of a major medical facility in Indianapolis that had been, it was a hospital that had been closed because they built a new hospital, 10 miles south of it. And so all of a sudden it was my two worlds of Indianapolis and North Carolina, racing, and then, the military stuff that I had done all seemed to come together in this one little moment in time of synergy. And so I was asked to initially do some groundwork up here in Indianapolis regarding the hospital and the feasibility of that facility, and so that led to me doing some work up here, and then then they let me know about what they were trying to do down in Rockingham, and I was absolutely excited about that because from my history in racing and my family's involvement up here in Indianapolis, I understood what Rockingham is, what Rockingham was, and what Rockingham means, on a historical level to, racing in the United States of America. And so, I went into it with that understanding, and I went into it with the understanding that all of the contractual stuff had been already done, and quote unquote, I didn't need to worry about any of that contractual stuff. I just needed to move forward on standing these facilities up. And that's kind of how I kind of came into it, and that's, and then I hit the ground running, and, you kind of saw what we did in about 9 months.
Yeah, and now you probably don't want to, maybe not want to throw it out there, but I'll say it. The gentleman we're talking about was Craig Northacker, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and nobody's going to dog him or anything here, but just to keep the facts straight, it was Craig Northacker. Vetshelp.org was the organization.
Yes, and again, there had been representations made to me that these contracts were already done, and I didn't need to worry about it. And of course, given I'm not naive. You let people make statements, and then eventually they've got to have the integrity to stand behind those statements, and then eventually they also have to prove it with the documentation. And so, when it came time for him to step up with the documents, he couldn't do it.
Okay, now talk about some of the plans that pertain to the track. I know that there was a lot of racing oriented plans to bring racing back to the facility of some kind, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But some non-racing things that were going to happen at the track for veterans.
Yeah. So, but before before we jump into that, I want to add that when things fell apart down there, I haven't stopped with, shall we say, kind of my interest in what I'm doing, and I've probably talked to. I know I've talked to more than a dozen, let's say probably less than 20 venture capital people in America and private real estate investment trusts. So, I've kept, I still have I think I have a very strong vested interest in that facility and trying to do something down there. The problem is, given the economy and what's happened in the last decade, there's no venture capital money that I can find. I'm not saying it's not out there. I'm just saying I haven't been able to find it. And, if something's going to happen, or if I'm able to create synergy around it, it's going to end up probably having to be private real estate investment trust money, because private real estate investment trusts don't have to kind of follow the same rules as publicly traded, because of that the disclosure side of how they're doing and what they're doing and why they're doing it. So with all of that said, there's still interest in America of the idea of a type of facility that would be used for not just motorsports, but also, again, in that case, by its proximity to Fort Bragg, and it's still fairly close to Moody, which is down in Georgia. It's a fantastic facility to use for more than just racing. And so, with that said, then let me back up. So when I got there was discussions about building dorms and about building hospital wings and about building all of this permanent infrastructure to help veterans. And when I first, again, kind of come in, what had been expressed to me was that those were very mature projects and they were very far down the path in their development. And then what I learned was they weren't mature projects. They hadn't even gotten past the initial stages of any semblance of due diligence.
Yeah, and
there's the short answer to your question. There's the long and the short answer to your question.
Yeah, and no, to kind of go back and put a pin on the previous comment on that. You and I have actually had multiple conversations since all that kind of went down about how can we move, or specifically you, I say we, but how can you move forward in trying to still make this happen? But also, you and I have had a lot of conversations in the past before this ever came along of, hey, what can we do? I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've talked about how can we get veterans involved in what we're doing and things like that. So definitely it's not that either one of us have just said, well, that's never going to happen and moved on. We just kind of got to change paths a little bit and try to figure out a different way to make it happen.
Yeah, so the big part of it is still funding. And,
exactly.
And then the problem with that is that the funding has to be put together in the right way, and it has to have the I guess for lack of better terms, it's got to have the right due diligence and focus and path forward. And it can't be kind of this shotgun approach. It has to be very analytical. It has to be done right. And let me just also dive in. I still have friends over at Fort Bragg. I've still got friends that are active duty. I still have friends that are retired, and it's just amazing that we're having this conversation, because 2 weeks ago I was talking to a guy in Dayton, Ohio, and he thank God came out on the other side of what he had to deal with, and he's gotten himself to a place that he is able to function. But he talks about the lost decade in his life, and that and he didn't want to badmouth the VA, because the VA is doing the best they can with what they've got. But he had said that he'd lost a lot of friends who just gave up because they didn't see anything else. They didn't have any hope for anything else. And I'd expressed to him what I had been trying to do, and kind of to my current situation, and he said that, he looked at me and said, "Whatever you tell me, whatever you need, I'll do it." Because if the regular people aren't the ones to reach back and give back and try to save these guys, no one's going to do it.
Yeah, and just to kind of finalize that part of it, that motorsports and the automotive side of the operation were going to be part of it, but the other part of it was, like you brought up, dorms, medical facilities, permanent infrastructure to help veterans. It was going to be more than just a motorsports facility.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And now I know you got to see. I got to be a little careful when we talk about this. I know you got to see it. Let's move forward with the racing part of it now. I know you got to see a lot of the backdoor numbers on the events that were held there prior to you guys getting the lease on it. Let's talk about some of the cost and some of the numbers. They held a lot of races there, but let's specifically talk about NASCAR. It's kind of what everybody wants to concentrate on. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't have the raw numbers. And if you have the raw numbers, if you want to spit them out, that's great. If we just want to give a rough idea, that's fine too. We won't even talk how they were able to get to the point to put on the first truck race, because that's a whole. Well, we may talk about that. That's a whole smodge of things all in its own. But the first truck race, how many tickets were printed to sell for that race? Or how many tickets were they hoping to sell for that race?
Well, I'll tell you this. They printed a ticket for every seat at the facility. They printed a hard copy ticket for every seat at the facility.
Okay.
I can't remember what the total number was, but they didn't sell half of the printed tickets that they had made. They were very old school in how they went about that.
Yeah. So they were hoping for a sellout or close.
Yes, sir.
And I'm kind of working my way back around to a subject here. So I think if I remember right, the very first race technically made a little bit of money, correct?
I think people said it did. I never saw it documented.
Yeah. And I'm just talking about that day's expenses versus what that day netted. I think I remember hearing from a couple of sources, you being one of them, that at least on paper, it technically made a little bit of money.
Sure.
The second year, it lost money, correct?
Yep.
And the third year, it lost big money, correct?
This is where my brain's telling me they only ran 2 races.
It may have been. I was thinking it was 3. It could have been 2. What do you think, Kyle? Why don't you giggle that, man? Let's find that out.
Somebody Google it, because I think there was only 2 trucks.
We're going to put Kyle on it. But basically, the first one was the only one that even came close to making money, and that was probably just on paper. The other 1 or 2 at least lost money. And see, this is what really blows my mind is, you hear a lot of outcry for that track to come back in some capacity. And while there was a large percentage of people that did come out and support it, really and truly, the amount of people that it would take to make that track successful just aren't going to come out there and watch a race at the end of the day.
Correct. And then the other problem is that the way the seating is configured there, them taking away the back grandstand. The back grandstand is where the track owner was making all their money for the event. That grandstand is now sitting in Concord on the south side of the drag strip. And so when that grandstand went, really that was the end of large scale racing there, what I'll call large format racing there.
Yeah, because I don't think number one, I don't think a lot of people, and we touched in this on the opening, but I don't think a lot of folks understand how this kind of works. I see it all the time. NASCAR should go back there. Well, it doesn't work that way. The track owner has to apply to NASCAR for a race.
Yep.
NASCAR doesn't just show up and go, "Yep, we're going to run a race here." Once you get approved for it, then there's a sanctioning fee that you have to pay. Do you have any idea roughly how much that was for Rockingham?
I don't remember, but I know it was. I will in my right now as I'm trying to visualize. I am 99% sure it was well north of $100,000.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And then the track has to put then the track puts up the purse. That's what I'm trying to say. Trying to get it out there. And the purse is, gosh, I see the entry blanks all the time. Had a total purse on it. They're shy of $300,000 for a truck race, I think. For the purse.
That sounds, yeah.
Yeah. So now you're probably in the range of $500,000 just to talk about having this race.
Right. Totally agree.
Yeah, and that's not the safer barriers that they require now. That's not repairing anything that the track needs. That's not, paying your people, track dryers, all the other things that it takes to put on an event. You're talking $500,000 to even think about having the event. By the time the dust settles, you're probably actually just shy of $1 million to have one event when you take everything in consideration, and that equates a lot of butts and seats, plus whatever sponsorship you can sell through the billboards at the track and parking and things like that. Then the track does get a small percentage of the TV money, but it takes a lot of butts in the seats to make it happen at the truck level, especially. Cup has a lot of different revenue streams, but a standalone truck race at a track in the middle of North Carolina, you're dependent a lot on the butts in the seats.
Yep.
So, and at the end of the day, not enough people were truly interested in that to make that happen.
Let me also. I'm going to back the truck up a little bit too, if you don't mind. One of the, and I'm not backing the truck up to run over anybody. I'm just going to state this as fact. When, and I'll put it in this terms, when NASCAR racing left that track was then picked clean of all of its assets that you could hold an event there, and all of the preventative maintenance at that facility stopped. So even when the track finally changed hands to somebody who was going to try to put a large-scale racing event there, they had to start from scratch as far as all of the ancillary and preventative maintenance and actual equipment in every stretch of the imagination that you would need to hold an event. It was nothing but a shell. And it was a shell that in that case had been ignored for almost a decade when it came to terms of the track surface, when it came to the catch fencing, when it came to erosion on parts of the property, the bathrooms. That none of that stuff had been updated and none of it had been maintained. So one of the other problems is you get control of the track and you're looking at this mountain of issues that need to be taken care of just to turn the place back on. And they didn't do it. They waited until a month before the race, and then it was, okay, we're just going to try to turn everything on, and whatever we get, we get. But they hadn't upgraded bathrooms. They hadn't upgraded anything. And forget upgrade. They just hadn't even, there was no preventative maintenance to it as well. Roofs were leaking, air conditioning units weren't working, and all of that stuff needed to be fixed before the event, because once you have the first event and everybody shows up there and goes, wow, they haven't changed the light bulb here in 15 years, you're not going to get those people back.
Yeah, exactly. You need to increase numbers, definitely not decrease numbers, which is actually what happened.
Correct. I wrote up a, I forget, it was maybe 17-page document. after my first visit down there, and it outlined all the roofs that needed to be redone, everything that was all the damage that needed to be fixed through lack of preventative maintenance. It went into if you were depending upon the level of racing you were going to have there, the catch fence still hadn't been updated. You did have a safer barrier, but your racing surface had been completely ignored. So that was the other irony was you put a safer barrier on a track that had surface and catch fence issues. And that's it again, and that's me focusing on the track. You still have issues with your concessions, your restrooms, just the basic convenience necessities that you have to have for people to come and feel relaxed and enjoy the day. And it wasn't there.
Yeah, it's not the '60s anymore. You can't just kick the gate open and go, "Hey, we're racing."
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that racing can't come back to that track. You and I have had many conversations over what we feel like would work there. I'm saying that if the current status quo continues, no one in their right mind, unless they hated money, would attempt to bring NASCAR any level back to that place. That's my opinion.
But you're correct. And then you have to look at people who have that kind of money to spend, and there's really only two entities that have that kind of money to spend. And both of those entities, at one shape or time, one of them owned the place, the other one could have owned the place, and both of those entities have facilities within an hour and a half, 2 hours of that track. So, I've said many times that, to me personally, the three most important tracks in NASCAR history are Martinsville, Rockingham, and Daytona. And I think it was somewhat sacrilegious for them to turn their back on that facility, because to me personally, that's how important that track was. I think you can bring the thing back to life, but you have to do it slowly, persistently, and consistently. And you gotta start small. You gotta crawl before you can walk. And that's no one wants to crawl anymore. Nobody wants to. And then let's get back to the other side of this. Let me come back to bring the truck all the way back around to venture capital and real estate investment trust money. They all want returns immediately. And
Yes.
that's the other problem with that place is that you need, probably 36 to 48 months to really kind of get it back in shape and turned on to a level where you could then start hosting large format events. Otherwise, you've got to, and this is what I'd written to, you've got to host a whole bunch of small events on the path to then building up to a large event. That nobody has the time, the patience, or the money, as you put, to keep throwing at it, to do a whole bunch of small events as you're building to the large event.
Yeah, it can be done. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm kind of on the side that I highly doubt NASCAR ever goes back there. Unless they change things, unless they drop the sanctioning fee tremendously, and up the television money or something. I'm not saying the purse needs to be cut. Good Lord knows teams don't need less money, need more money. But it has to be, like they're trying to cut costs for the teams now, that the cost would have to be cut for the track. But the status quo is still in place. I don't see how they could pull it off and make a profit. They don't mind losing money, and that's okay. But yeah, I feel like you that you could easily turn that place on to a lot smaller events strung out through the year. And I'm not saying 365 days a year, but if you could get, 100 decent, not 100, let's say 50 decent events a year of multiple scales, then I think it's a fully functioning, stand on its own 2 feet facility.
Yeah, and just so you know, the presentation that I've made several times, again, venture capital and private real estate investment trust. I outline it by saying you got to turn the place on 365 days out of the year. There has to be, and some of this is it's a metaphor for the fact that you just have to have something small happening there as much as you can.
Yeah.
Let me take this chance to then dovetail into the fact that while what everybody kind of saw was that you had come up with what I perceived was a brilliant formula for X Cup that kind of took the best of what was there, but also learned from the mistakes that other people had made. And I still think that formula is a fantastic formula. While you were doing that, I was still out chasing other forms of motorsports that are underrepresented in that part of the United States of America and or don't have a consistent home in that part of the United States of America. And some of those motorsports have less than 4 wheels. And that was all going on in the background. And ironically, something that I had pitched to one of the sanctioning bodies came to fruition 18 months later at a different track. And it was exactly what I had pitched for them to do down in Rockingham. So we weren't wrong in that you were going to have stuff that was in dirt. You were going to have stuff that was on the road course. You were going to have stuff that was on a road course that was dirt. You were going to have stuff that was on the oval. You were going to have, we legitimately were looking at about, I think we came up with, we were north of 200 events there in what we were lining up. And so what we had lined up, the X Cup was just, 10% of it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. I think.
Yeah, and we didn't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying. I don't think people realize that you guys had solid commitments from other organizations, completely away from stock cars per se.
Yep. And so after this fact, the 2 major organizations are still. I won't say they're 100% behind me, but they still have said, if you get control of the track, call us immediately.
Yeah, and that's that's the shame side of it. For as much as I kind of poo-poo on the NASCAR stuff there, I'm with you. I think it could be a solid facility if somebody came in with the right mindset.
Well, my initial walkthrough, I had thought that we were going to, because let me back up. Again, one of the problems with trying to hold a large format racing event there is they stole the bleachers from the backstretch, and so that makes it difficult for everybody else. And then the other side of that was they couldn't even fill the bleachers in 1 and 2 and on the front stretch. So I had initially gone down there and thought that we were going to take down and scrap the bleachers in 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And we were going to kind of we were going to, it's kind of like, having to kick off an appendage to save the body. And then an individual, again, with another form of motorsports, walked me into the center of the infield and looked down. He pointed me down into 1 and 2, and then he pointed me down to the infield, and he goes, here's what I want to do here. And then the whole thing made sense. And so, now, you gotta maintain the facility the way it is, and there's a way to have multiple forms of motorsports events going on simultaneously on that property, and that's what we were looking at. It was much more large scale. But as I say that, it wasn't large scale in the sense that you're going to have a large format singular event. You were going to have several smaller events all happening at the same time.
Exactly. And in the opening, we talked a little bit about the X Cup stuff, but let's touch maybe on that a little bit. The only reason I say let's touch on the X Cup stuff is because that sort of weaves into some of the final days of of my having to do with the track. We had set up the X Cup for 10 events. Gosh, man, 8 on the mile and 2 on the road course. That's correct, right?
Yeah, but I'll also say, I think you and I used to have a friendly argument about I wanted to do 50-50, but yeah.
Well, I thought, I never had a problem really heading that direction. We just had to convince everybody else of it. Actually, what I perceived was at some point, at some place down the road, was also including the half mile out back, which it's a track, and that's literally it. There's no, it's a track in a field. There's no stands or buildings or anything. So that was going to be a little bit down the road. But to me, I mean, that would be the perfect home for a unique racing series that was economical. You had so many races on the mile, so many on the road course, so many on the short track out back, and I just don't know what else you could ask for. And in one place, guys you're racing all these different tracks, but you're not driving all over the country. It's in one place. And without getting in, because I don't remember everything, but without getting into the numbers and pointing fingers and stuff, basically we came up with a purse per race. I think it was $12,500 total per race for the first year, and that was going to be covered by Vetshelp, Craig Northacker, and we had the tire test down there. I mean, we were full steam ahead. I don't think people realize how much behind the scene work we actually did trying to pull this off. But right about the time we were creeping up on the first date for the Cup Series is when things really started to kind of unravel. Once you kind of just touch base on what started happening on your end so that you could kind of see the chinks in the armor, and then maybe, hey, this deal might be falling apart.
It's not complicated. There were contractual things that he had to have done in advance of being able to pull that off, and he didn't have them.
That's pretty simple.
So documents that he claimed he had, he didn't have. Contracts he claimed he had, he didn't have.
And also, too, the lease was coming to. He had a 2-year lease, correct?
I can't remember the specifics of it, but I kept wanting to see the lease, and I kept being. He wouldn't let me see it, which that was an indicator. And in the fall and the winter, I had enough things to do that I didn't push him on it. Mm-hmm. And then getting into the first quarter of the year, I started to push him for the documentation, and that led to some very tense conversations, shall we say.
Yeah. But basically what we kind of saw, the first little bit of the unraveling was you start to hear rumors from other people that, hey, the lease is coming to an end and they're not going to renew a lease, that they're going to have to now purchase the track, but supposedly they couldn't come to terms on the price. And there was a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of simplification of it. Was it was time to fish or cut bait, and they decided to cut bait.
Yes, but he had made commitments that he could close on the track. I mean, the number of times I heard him say, "Well, I can close on the track right now, but I've got other things I need to get lined up." And you can go with that for a little bit, but then eventually, as you know, you've got to make plans, and then as you get closer to the plans come to fruition, the people who've made the commitments have to step up. And so, when we negotiated doing the deal to establish the X Cup out there, and he signed those documents, that made me feel comfortable that I was working for somebody who was going to do what he said he was going to do. And because I thought in my mind, well, there's no way he could sign those documents. He could didn't have the other stuff lined up that he claims he has lined up, and he keeps telling me to not worry about and keep moving forward on everything else I was doing. And then sure enough, nope. You know, the rug got pulled out from under us real fast and real hard.
Yeah, you know, and you know, for my part of it and the X Cup part of it, if we weren't going to have the facility, then we had no series.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. That was it. Without that facility, we were screwed.
Yeah, you know, we had talks of making it a touring short track series, and we actually held a test at Dillon, and it just, you know, the interest was just, I don't know if it was, you know, guys being trepidatious about moving forward because there's so much unknown stuff with Rockingham or whatever. But at the end of the day, there wasn't enough interest to keep it alive. I think if we could have had it at Rockingham, it would have been. I think the first race we would have been really light on cars, but I think before the season was even close to being over, we'd have had more cars than we could start easily.
Well, I agree, and you remember you and I, because obviously my love has always been for the truck series. One of the things that I kept hammering you on was I wanted trucks out there at the same time, because I thought on that track, which is much more about mechanical grip, I thought trucks would have done well running at the exact same time as the cars, and then you would have wound up with this kind of, I would have considered a gentleman's feud between whether you're a car guy or a truck guy.
Yeah,
I still fall in the trucks. You know, I still love the trucks.
Yeah, and that was in the rules. You could you could run a truck or a car that was in the rules. And of course, you know how racers are, man. They're going to complain about anything. But you know, I had so many guys complain. Well, there's no way that the trucks can run with the cars and blah blah blah. And I'm like, look, man, build your truck, put it out there, and let's just see if it's that big a gap. We'll fix it. If enough trucks show up, we'll have a truck series. But you know, everybody, I don't know. You know how guys are.
Well, up here at Indianapolis Raceway Park, when they were running super trucks and you know, late model stocks, which were basically at that point were like old ARCA cars, the trucks were outrunning the cars.
Yeah, in certain situations, I mean, dude, trucks have way more side force than people realize.
Yep.
You can flat foot trucks at a lot of tracks that you can't even think about flat footing a car around.
Yep, you got it.
You know, the straightaway speed may be a hair off, but the corner speed more than makes up for it. So, but you know how racers are. They're going to complain about something. If you and I cured cancer, they'd find a way to complain about it if it involved in racing. So, so that kind of takes care of the final days of the track. I mean, is there anything you want to throw in there from your perspective?
From my perspective, still, again, it's out of sight, out of mind. Again, since then, I've probably, more than 12, less than 20 venture capital and private real estate investment trust. One of the problems is, all of them that I have any sort of relationship is up here in the north. So I have to do a lot of education as to, North Carolina and the South. And the other side of that is the venture capital money in this country, and I know I'm kind of getting off the track a little bit, but it's all surrounding medical, it seems to be all surrounding medical device and medical stuff. It's not like it was back in the late 80s and early 90s where, there was, like, for example, when all of these outdoor music amphitheaters were being built, eventually that was all being built with venture capital money. It wasn't being built with corporate money. It was being built with private money. And so, somehow, because otherwise what's going to happen is that place is, nature's going to take the place over, and you're going to get to a point where the racing surface is, because it hasn't, there's been no preventative maintenance on it, where you're trying to sell it as a racetrack, but you can't race on that racing surface anymore because there hasn't been preventative maintenance on it for almost 20 years. And and then what do you got? And so there is a window of opportunity to make that place a multi-purpose, multifunctional facility and property. I've been kind of yelling about it now for a long time, and I hope at some point, whether I get a chance to do it or somebody else gets a chance to do it, I hope somebody does it, because that's racetracks. Like I said, that to me, that's one of the top 3 most important racetracks in NASCAR, and it's an amazing facility.
And the current owners, it's kind of my understanding that they don't seem to be in a hurry to sell it. I mean,
which I don't know why. I don't know why. I would think that they would want to get out from under it, but
yeah, I do too. I mean, I know it's technically for sale. It's actually listed for sale, but I mean, at an unrealistic number.
correct.
But from what I understand, there's been some numbers floated around that are way more realistic, and that would actually probably put them at breaking even on the deal, or maybe a little bit ahead, but they're just not really interested in that. I guess they want to let it sit there and fall on the ground, or make crazy money, one of the two.
Right, and so my understanding is, and it could be wrong, is that since then they've had one person put it under contract, and that person then did their due diligence and realized what it was going to take to turn it back on, and walked away.
Yeah. Because let's just touch on that to make sure we covered everything. There's a huge problem there with the water supply. All the wells are non-functioning, correct?
Correct.
And a lot of the buildings have roofing problems. They leak. They're falling in, whatever. The garage has some issues too, I think I saw when I was down there. Is there anything with the power going on other than it doesn't have any?
Well, but the problem with the power is that when they dropped the power in there back in the 90s, when they kind of upgraded stuff, it was designed for only 2 events a year. So it is a patchwork quilt of electronic lines running around the property, and you can't get you ask very simply, well, how much does it cost to provide power to the facility for a month? And nobody can answer the question. And even the power company can't, because the power company's like, well, we run all these sublines in there, and then we have all these transformers in there, and you've got to pay for that too. And it's like, well, no, we're not going to. You'll pay for, no one pays for something that they don't use and they don't want. And so it's suffering from it's suffering from neglect, and it's suffering from the fact that it really only had 2 events there a year, and everything was geared around that business model. And you've got to stand it up to operate 365 days out of the year, and there is going to be a cost associated with that, and that cost is going to be very high. It's probably not as much as what it would cost to buy the track. It's going to be a big chunk of it, and so when you're representing something as fully functional and ready to go, you better make sure it's fully functional and ready to go, and it's not.
Yeah, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but my thinking's kind of been, if the track goes for a real number, which is, in my mind, you can tell me if I'm wrong, in my mind is somewhere in the $2 million range, give or take a couple of $100,000. You'd probably be somewhere in the 50 to 60% of that number is what it's going to take to get it back to fully operational. Even at the end, but when you're done.
Correct.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
And so part of the problem with that is that somebody who wants to buy it wants to recoup their money as quickly as possible, and that's a lot of money to then put into something to still, at the end of the day, not have made dime one back. So everything that I had written took kind of the flip the equation on its head and took a much more long-term approach, which was, you get it, and then you slowly start beginning the process of, you establish preventative maintenance, and you slowly start to bring it back alive through the preventative maintenance, as opposed to throwing a crap ton of money at it all at once. Because then, as you're slowly bringing it back to life, you start with, and I don't care if the very first event is some 8th grade class with a lemonade stand. You start with very, very small events, and you start to build on that, as opposed to we're going to buy it and have a large format race.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, we started. You approached me about doing our testing out there just to have some movement, to make something happen out there, some kind of something going on, and we did that for quite a while, and we touched base on that in the open. But it's I think if there was a guy sitting here today who wanted to stroke a check and said, hey, I want to hold a truck series race there next year, I think that check is going to be somewhere in the $4 to $5 million range by the time the dust settles.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to do it that quickly.
And then the problem is now is that while they got a safer barrier up, they never fixed the catch fence.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that safer barrier is the bare minimum they require. It's not like it's you see a lot of these tracks now, virtually every wall is covered with a safer barrier. This is the bare minimum they require.
Yep.
And we won't even get into how they paid for that.
Well, thank you.
That's a talk for another show.
Well, but again, then let me also say this. So you put a safer barrier up around a racing surface that you didn't do anything to fix the racing surface.
Yeah.
And you didn't do anything to fix the catch fence.
Yeah.
So, wait, what? So, what I would say is that if God bless, if somebody really wants to do it, I would love to be part of turning that place back on, but they've got to have a mentality that's not, we're just going to add water and have races. It has to be slow, methodical, and you got to build with little things.
Yeah, and and just so we're clear, it can be done for less than 4.5 to 5 million, but you have to have that approach. I'm saying if you want to hold a race there next year of that kind of level, you're way up there. And here's the thing: for as many flaws as previous ownership had, I can see what they were doing. I mean, they were rolling the dice that the first one was going to be a huge success, and it just wasn't. And it was a downhill slide from there.
Yeah, but let me also say that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Steve O'Donnell. I met him and talked with him a lot back when I was in the truck series and he was running the truck series. And if I don't think Steve O'Donnell would allow racing back out there without, I just gave you, so let's talk about three points of safety: safer barrier, the racing service, and the catch fence. I don't imagine NASCAR allowing Steve O'Donnell allowing anybody back out there until the racing service and the catch fence is fixed.
Yeah, and that's above and beyond everything else we've talked about. So that, and one of the things we advertised with this show coming up was why, in my opinion, no one in their right mind would ever try to hold another NASCAR race there. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. When you roll all those things together and look at it, it just does not make sense. Not saying it can't be done, but it just doesn't make sense in my mind.
Well, yeah, and again, how are you going to throw that much money at it? Because then even if you sold out every seat of the place, you don't have the infrastructure there to support it.
Yeah. And you're years. If every race was a sellout, you're still years down the road from breaking even. And then by that point, you're going to have to invest more money. So I mean, you're a ways away from making a profit. Strictly off NASCAR. I mean, yeah, you can. You got to do something other than the NASCAR races. But the NASCAR race is going to put you so far in the hole, it's going to be crazy.
So then let me try to end this on a more positive note.
Absolutely.
I was the level. I have not been as scared as I was when we did the tire test. For a whole bunch of reasons, I had not been that scared in my life, and I tried to not show it that day. But I was worried to death what that tire test was going to show. And that was you and I talked about the tire test. Is that me having defense engineering background, I was very sensitive to the fact that it had to be a real test. It had to be a legitimate test. and anybody that wanted to be involved with it that didn't want to have a real achievement test, I didn't want to have anything to do with that. And that tire test went so well that I was stunned, and I hadn't been stunned like that in a long time. And I absolutely think that you could do something there, small format, and if there's any question about the tire, that would hold up to that racing surface and provide really good, competitive, side-by-side, healthy racing. We found the tire.
Oh yeah. And that was American Racer too. And gosh, the guy's name escapes me. That was the rep that was there that day. But we touched base with them. I mean, just walked up and started talking to them at PRI, the PRI before that test, and they were on board from day one. And they kind of guessed at it, but I think they brought the perfect tire for that place. And we put 50 hard laps, which was the plan. And that's a lot of laps at Rockingham on one set of tires. We put 50, plus or minus 50. We did some warm-up laps and stuff. But we put 50 hard laps on those tires. And anybody that knows anything about race tires, we're going to talk about the hole being good. They still had good hole on them. And of course, we knew that we needed to be conservative with our front end settings because Rockingham will chew a tire alive. So yes, we were really cognizant of our temperatures and our pressures, and we made one small camber change that day, I think, but we were pretty good, right out of the trailer. I was tickled. Our goal had been 100 laps. We scaled that back to 50 so that guys didn't have to buy two sets of tires. But my biggest thing for that particular deal was, okay, after a 50-lap race on a set of stickers, can guys come back the following week and practice on these tires? And I think the answer would have been yes.
Right, and that was this is why I was blown away. And you talk about the tire wear, but what I always thought this is what so I'll mention the fact that I worked in IndyCar racing back in the '90s, and what I had learned from IndyCar racing was looking at consistency on all four corners of the vehicle. And because sometimes people will start to only look at the tire in each area, and they won't look at all four tires together. And what blew me away was the consistency of the wear across all four tires.
Yes. Of course, and that all comes back to a well-balanced race car. And sometimes us, and we're not trying to toot our own horn here, but sometimes racers can be their own worst enemies with some of these crazy setups. We did roll in knowing that, hey, we need to have a car that has competitive speed in it, but that we're not abusing one corner or the other. Because that track will chew tires up and spit them out if you let it.
Right, and correct. And then if the racer doesn't know how to drive the car, or you got the wrong setup, and you start burning right front tires off of it, that's on you.
Yeah. But I think I'm like you, man. I think that was the exact right tire for the exact right track for the exact right car. It's just a shame that we couldn't pull all the pieces together.
Yeah, amen.
Well, man, I think that's it. You got anything else you want to throw in there before we take off?
No, other than you took a leap of faith, and I love you for it. And I'm sorry that it didn't work out, and I'm sorry that you to a certain degree, were hung out to dry, and I feel bad about any problems or discomfort that caused you, and it breaks my heart that we A, that happened, and that B, that we couldn't make something real and positive come to fruition.
Yeah, no kidding, man, no kidding. It was a hell of an idea, but I've had a lot of good ideas before, and I hope to have a couple more down the road. So let's see what happens. But you know me, man. At the end of the day, I'm a gambler. I'll roll the dice and just see what happens. It's worked out more times than not, but every hand can't be a winner.
That's why I love you, and that's again, it's if you do nothing, it's real easy.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. That's it. You gotta, gosh, man. I tell guys this constantly. Hey, man, give it a shot. What you got to lose? You can always go back to where you're at. I mean, I can fill a job application out somewhere. If all this goes away tomorrow, I can go to work for Lowe's or something stupid. But give it a shot anyway. You never know, right?
Yep, amen.
That's it, man. That's it. Hey, hang on for a second. We're gonna sign off here, but I'll talk to you for just a second.
Simple.
Well, okay, guys, that was our show on Rockingham Speedway as far as myself being involved with it. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I want to thank my partner, Jim Blankenbaker, for calling in on that deal and giving us awesome insight into behind the scenes of how that deal worked out / didn't work out, that sort of thing. Ran a little bit long on this podcast. I know. I apologize. Try to keep these things to about 30 to 45 minutes typically. I know we ran over, so I'm going to keep this close really, really short. I just want to kind of give you guys an idea of what's coming up. Next podcast coming up, we're going to talk about BK Racing a little bit, some of their stuff that's came out. I want to talk a little bit about Ryan Preece. We're going to talk more Level 1 Motorsports stuff. On that note, please go check out the new website, l1motorsports.com. If you or anybody you know is interested in becoming a development driver, you can find all the information right there. We only have about a half a season booked so far, with guys moving up in classes and things like that. We're always on the lookout for new talent. So if you or somebody you know is interested, go check it out. If you have any questions on our podcasts or for our podcasts, feel free to leave them at the bottom of the YouTube page. DM me on Twitter, Facebook, Level 1 Motorsports. James Martin on Facebook also. That's my personal page. Shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, james.martin@l1motorsports.com. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. And I think that's it. I think we went over everything. Be sure to like our Facebook page while you're there sending me a message. Almost forgot to sneak that in. And to subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, the first episode of our new video series is also on our YouTube channel. Be sure to check it out. We document the process of putting together a race car to use for testing vehicle. Personally, I think it's super interesting. Hope you do too. Check it out. Let us know your thoughts. Anyway, we're going to leave it here for now. Once again, thanks for listening. And hey, I'll see you at the track.